A Boeing 777 carrying 239 people simply vanished. No distress call, no midair explosion, no wreckage on the water, just gone. Even today, with all our modern technology, nobody can say exactly what happened. We're going to dive deep into the most haunting aviation mystery of our time. We'll reconstruct the flight, track the terrifying trail of digital clues, and see exactly where the evidence truly leads. You know what makes this mystery so incredibly chilling? It's how completely normal it began. The last thing anyone on the ground ever heard from the cockpit was just an utterly routine, calm sign-off. Good night, Malaysian 370. It was just a standard handover from Malaysian airspace to Vietnamese airspace. The voice was relaxed, nothing was wrong. But then, less than 2 minutes later, the aircraft's tracking systems went completely dark. So you have to ask yourself, how does a massive, modern airliner just disappear from the face of the Earth? A plane of that size doesn't just slip through the cracks, right? It leaves a digital footprint. To even begin to understand what happened to MH370, we have to follow a trail of clues that are as brilliant as they are deeply unsettling. Part 1. The night it vanished. 239. Before we start tracking the exact minutes where an ordinary flight turned into a thriller, we really need to pause and remember what this number represents. These were real lives. We're talking about parents flying home to their kids, dedicated engineers, a delegation of acclaimed artists, a young flight attendant who was just weeks away from her wedding, people from 14 different nations boarding what was supposed to be a totally routine overnight flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. They settled into their seats, the cabin lights dimmed, and they trusted the system to bring them home. The timeline of what happens next is so precise, it's terrifying. At 12:41 a.m., they take off into a clear night. The ascent is flawless. At 1:19 a.m., we get that final calm voice contact. But watch what happens here. At exactly 1:21 a.m., right at the boundary of Malaysian and Vietnamese airspace, which is kind of a navigational no man's land where neither country is paying super close attention, the transponder is switched off. The plane instantly disappears from civilian screens. And then, at 1:30 a.m., something happens that changes this from a tragedy into a terrifying mystery. Civilian radar saw absolutely nothing. But Malaysian military radar, which bounces raw radio waves off metal in the sky, totally independent of transponders, caught something impossible. Just seconds after vanishing from civilian screens, the aircraft didn't fall, it turned. A hard, deliberate left turn, almost doubling back on itself. It headed straight back across the Malay Peninsula. This wasn't a plane drifting aimlessly. It was navigating precisely from waypoint to waypoint, clearly guided by someone in the cockpit. Part 2, tracking the ghost plane. That hard left turn we just talked about, it really should have solved the mystery. Instead, it created an even bigger one. The plane didn't crash in the South China Sea. It became a ghost plane, flying silently through the night. The data messaging system goes quiet. The transponder is switched off. Complete radio silence. Followed by a deliberate 180-degree turn away from Beijing. Look, in aviation, multiple critical communication systems don't just fail simultaneously right at an airspace boundary, while the plane perfectly executes a complex pre-programmed turn. The sequence strongly suggests a deliberate act, not some sudden catastrophic mechanical failure. Someone was flying that plane, and they definitely did not want to be found.
For days, an international fleet desperately scoured the waters east of Malaysia, searching the South China Sea where the plane last spoke. But here's the crazy part. Malaysian authorities actually held on to that military radar data for days. They knew the plane had gone west, back over the country, and out toward the Andaman Sea. But that critical information was delayed. Precious time was lost chasing a ghost in the completely wrong ocean, while the actual aircraft flew entirely unmonitored.
With the plane off radar entirely, investigators needed a miracle. And they actually found one in space. Even with all communications severed, a terminal on the plane continued to send automated, hourly handshakes to a satellite. It's kind of like a sleeping smartphone pinging a cell tower in the background. Engineers cleverly used the Doppler effect, measuring tiny frequency shifts in those pings caused by the plane's motion relative to the satellite, to figure out its direction. That brilliant mathematics proved the plane turned south, tracing what became known as the seventh arc. 7. For 7 hours after its last radio contact, this fully functioning aircraft flew in a straight line, away from any coastline, away from any airport, away from literally any hope of rescue. It flew relentlessly south hour after hour in the pitch black, until the engines finally starved of fuel in the emptiest, darkest bottom of the world. Part 3. The deepest, darkest ocean. Because where that seventh arc ultimately led is almost beyond human comprehension. The search area in the southern Indian Ocean is a terrifying environment. We are talking about a violently turbulent graveyard older than humanity. Unmapped underwater mountain ranges, sheer cliffs, the freezing Diamantina Trench, and depths exceeding 4,000 meters. Down there, the pressure is literally crushing. The darkness is absolute. It was a complete logistical nightmare hampered by brutal surface weather and towering ocean swells. They were searching a treacherous landscape that we actually know less about than the surface of Mars. For 16 agonizing months, they found absolutely nothing. The ocean kept its secret. Then, something happened nobody expected. On July 29, 2015, more than 3,000 kilometers away from the primary search zone, a man cleaning a beach on Reunion Island off the coast of Africa found a barnacle-covered piece of metal tangled in the surf. After all that time, the ocean had finally given something back. What he found was a flopperon, a moving section on the trailing edge of an aircraft wing used to control roll, and the serial number stamped inside this exact piece of metal traced it beyond a shadow of a doubt to Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. This was a heartbreaking but incredibly vital discovery. It proved definitively that the plane met a violent end in the water, and it proved the complex satellite math was right all along. MH370 was in the Indian Ocean. Part 4. The chilling clues. So, we know where it ended up, but why? Who was actually flying? This is easily the most uncomfortable and heavily debated part of the entire mystery. Investigators were faced with two starkly contrasting realities. On one hand, data recovered by the FBI from the captain's home flight simulator showed that just weeks before the disappearance, a simulated flight was flown deep into the remote southern Indian Ocean until fuel exhaustion, and the files were subsequently deleted. That is a staggering coincidence. But on the other hand, the official Malaysian report emphasizes that they found absolutely no conclusive link. The pilot was totally cleared of psychological or behavioral issues by authorities, and his family vehemently defends his legacy as a dedicated, loving professional. As one aviation expert put it, the evidence leans uncomfortably in one direction, but the one thing no one has ever been able to do is prove it. The deliberate flight path and the severing of communications definitely lean uncomfortably toward human intervention, but without the black boxes, without the cockpit voice recorder, no one can actually prove it. We can't declare fact where we only have theory. We just don't have those final pieces of the puzzle to say definitively who or what brought down this plane. Part 5. An endless mystery. Because you see, this story is not a closed chapter in a history book. 232,000. That is the staggering amount of square kilometers of deep ocean floor that have been meticulously mapped and scanned over the years. We're talking about an area roughly the size of the entire United Kingdom. And yet, the main wreckage, the fuselage, the black boxes, they've never been found. But the search refuses to die. In 2026, a new private search is slated to begin under a no-find, no-fee agreement. Based on refined drift modeling and some really advanced satellite analysis, highly advanced robotic submarines will literally fly through the pitch-black water, kilometers beneath the surface, scanning the remaining high-probability zones. The investigation is very much alive right now. Which leaves us with one final haunting question. Will the ocean ever give up its secrets? Somewhere out there in the dark, the truth of MH370 is waiting. Until those black boxes are finally brought to the surface, 239 people remain suspended in the greatest aviation mystery in human history. Will a robot suddenly light up a shape in the deep? Or will the seventh arc keep its silence forever?